Thank you for coming here. I'm very honored to introduce you to Professor Andrea Baldi. There is no professor in the name, but trust me, he's an associate professor. But he doesn't like to be called prof, so don't call him by prof, just call him his name, Andrea. It's not impolite, it's totally acceptable, and this is what is encouraged. So this is a really rare chance for us for MIPAtalk. So this is a talk that hosted by the faculty. So it covers various topics, but today's is really special because I think this is probably few among many, if not the first, like the talk that really is universal. So this is about soft skills. This is about PowerPoint presentation, which is really important. Whether you are a scientist, whether you are students, whether you are professionals. So this is really the skills that we all need to have because this can really define your career in the future. And with us is Andrea, which I know Andrea first. I met Andrea first in 2014 in a conference in Manchester. The first time I even knew Andrea, but then I watched his presentation, and it was really amazing. So that was my first impression of him, and this is, I don't tell a lie. So it's really like, wow, this guy can really present, and then this is amazing, this is how we want to present. But then, over the years, I know Andrea more because we work in a more like very close field, but then we meet a couple of times more after that, and even 4 years before, 4 years ago, I had the chance to actually work with Andrea during my postdoctoral studies, and then I learned all about this. And since I'm new here, maybe not any of you have seen my presentation, but my presentation and my way of teaching is heavily influenced by Andrea. So this is really show that the impact that it has if you have seen it. So without further ado, so let's give the room to Andrea, and hopefully we can learn a lot and implement some of the tips that we learned. So please, Andrea.
Thank you so much. Well, thanks a lot, Ferry, for the really kind introduction. I feel like I'm going to certainly disappoint you after this amazing introduction. One thing that great presenters do is they take charge of the room. And so, can I ask everybody who's in the back, there is like 3, 5, 9 chairs here closer, and we are so far away, I don't even see your face. Can I ask you to move closer? Like, can we make it a little more intimate? Let's all move closer, come on. Come on, move to the front. Otherwise, we don't see each other. I don't see if you're falling asleep during the presentation or if you're still moving. I would really love for you to take these chairs and come over here and sit in the front. There's plenty of space. Come on. Thank you so much. Thank you. Come on. It's probably not common friendly to be very close to each other, but it's much more close.
There's no pocket.
Oh, nice. Thank you so much. That's really appreciated. Now I can see you better, and actually I can point at you and ask you a question. You will see that actually that's also part of what I'm going to be talking about. Like, know the room in which you're going to be talking, and that allows you to lower the stress and kind of take control of the presentation. Thank you. So, as Ferry was saying, yeah, my name is Andrea Baldi. If you want to reach out to me, this is my email and this is my Twitter handle. I'm going to put these slides again at the end. So, maybe now you're doubting whether you want to reach out, and towards the end, you definitely want to reach out to tell how awful the talk was, then you can do it. And my institution is the Universitas in Amsterdam. And, so I'm Italian, by the way, I'm not Dutch, so I also live in Portugal, just to give you a little bit of feedback. So in order to disappoint you, the first thing that I'm going to say is that this is a presentation, but it's not always very effective. I've actually put a lot of ideas into it, and so somehow this is more of a sharing of ideas with you, rather than what I would consider like, for example, conference presentation, right? When I go to a conference, I construct it a little bit differently, or when I do a job interview, I construct it a little bit differently. let's say if I do a group meeting presentation, that's also someone actually said that every presentation that you give is a job interview, regardless whether it is a job interview. So always prepare to the maximum so that you're ready to harvest the most out of it. Now, the first thing that I should say is, why and can you trust me? Like, do I have any recognition or any authority to speak about how to make a good presentation? And the answer is no, absolutely not, except for the fact that Ferry thought that I gave good presentations. However, the one thing that I could show is, for example, these are my promotion targets. That's what I need to do to get promoted to senior associate. There is several targets in terms of publications and citations, H-index, blah, blah, blah. And the one thing that I really excel at is invited lectures. For some reason, I mean, lectures, people actually like it and they keep on inviting me back. So I thought, okay, maybe that's one curriculum that I have that I can show you to convince you that maybe you can trust me. The other thing that I really like and I'm very proud of is that my students keep getting recognition for the presentations that they give. So this is my first PhD student, Matteo, who won the Graduate Student Award for the best presentation at the European Material Research Society in Poland. Second PhD student, Rifat, he won the gold medal at the MRS, Material Research Society meeting in Boston. And he was competing with people from Stanford, Yale, UCLA. So I know that the method that I'm teaching my student actually works. And like this summer, Pang Li, she's a Chinese PhD student in my group, she won the best poster award at a conference in Italy. So at least I think I gave good presentations and my students get recognition for the presentations that they give. That's the whole curriculum that I can highlight. But this is actually the first time that I'm giving this presentation to the faculty. And so I'm actually really interested to know your feedback and to hear your questions, because this is my way of approaching it. In fact, I learned a lot from another scientific communicator that I'm going to share with you later. But I would love to hear feedback. I would love to actually learn from you what you think might work and what you think maybe doesn't work. It's not as powerful as you think. So by all means, during the presentation, raise your hand and ask me a question. Just don't raise a hand, just shout your question. I'm super happy to stop and interact. Now, how does the presentation look like? Well, I'm going to touch upon 4 things. And the first one is how to plan a presentation. And I put it at the head because that's the first thing we should do, right? We often think that presentations are the slides. That's actually not true. Presentation is a story. And so we should have in our mind exactly what we want to say. So how do we plan it? And then once we have a plan, once we know what we're going to be talking about, how do we structure it? How does it look like? And so how do we structure a presentation? And then I'm going to touch upon also how to design slides. I'm very passionate about that, and I give a hard time to my students. Anytime I see a slide, I have a million comments on it. And finally, I will talk about how to deliver your talk. Because you can have a great plan, you can have a great slide with a deck of slides that are perfectly polished and they have a perfect structure and they tell you the story. But then if you're shaking and you're about to pass out when you're presenting, then of course that kind of ruins it all. I don't know how many of you have given a presentation in front of an audience. By raise your hand. In front of an audience. Have you ever given a PowerPoint presentation? I'm assuming that you have, so I cannot believe that you're not raising. Have you given a presentation? Raise your hand. No? No presentation ever? I don't believe it. How many of you, before giving that presentation, had an enhanced heart rate and dry mouth? Yes, I see you. Like, I hated it. I hated giving presentations at conferences. I still remember how nervous I was in 2014 at that conference that I presented at. I did well, but I was dying inside. So this method actually allows you to get to the point where you're giving a presentation and you will not, get away with your anxiety. You will still get nervous. But the thing is, you get nervous only about the things that you care about, right? If I didn't care about giving a good presentation today, then I wouldn't have raised heart rates or anything. Right? That means that we can. But maybe we can get to the point where we give a presentation and, yeah, we're a little nervous about it, but once we get into the flow, we actually enjoy the process. Okay, so first thing, how do we plan a presentation? So, well, there are a few things that we need to take into account. The first one, and I think this is a big one, is who are we talking to, right? This is the first law of communication. Communication is always a transfer of information that is from myself, in this case, to you. And the transfer of information has to be tuned to my audience, right? right? I need to know who you are, if you're first year bachelor students or if you're this selection committee that wants to hire. And so I need to honor that thing. And so that's actually the first thing that I ask anytime that I get invited to give a presentation. I ask, who is in the audience? How many are there? What is their background? What do they want from me, and what do I want from them? Right? So know their background. Am I talking to physicists? Then I will use a physicist approach. Am I talking to chemists? I'm going to use a chemistry approach. Also, focus on their interest, right? I need to make sure that you are excited about this presentation. And I can be as excited as I want about the little research that I do in my office, but if you don't care, then why am I talking to you? And the third thing is consider the transformation. This is an interesting one. Like, what do I want you to be at the end of my presentation, right? If you come out of this room exactly as you entered, then maybe this was a wasted hour and a half, right? So what is it that I want from you, and how do I want you to get out of this room? This is often also what I tell my students. Like, when you write the conclusions to your paper, like your scientific paper, think about what is it that the scientific community now that has read the paper can do. How did you empower the scientific community to go beyond what you have done, right? So consider how you're going to be transformed today. The other thing is humans love a good story. So tell it like a story, right? I'm not doing a great job today, but I'm trying to include some things. I connected to Febby, and I've told you about the conferences that my students went to, and a little bit my promotion targets. I'm meaning personal, for example. But also, I'm standing right here in front, I'm actually moving my hands, and I know that as long as I talk like this, all your eyes are on me. You're not looking at that screen, and if I want you to look at that screen, I can just point at this, right? And if I point at it, without using a pointer actually, and then afterwards I can bring back your attention to where actually the presentation is, which is here. So, I am the presentation, or you are the presentation when you give the presentation. That's not the presentation, those are the slides. Just tell. Also make it personal, like tell your story. Don't be a robot, right? We're human beings, we are talking to each other, and we respond to human beings and to human feelings and stories, right? If you can add humor. I don't have a great sense of humor. But if you're good at it, add it. I mean, everybody loves laugh. So, and I put here an amazing Italian Nobel Prize winner for literature. He was a peer. So the other thing is, this is something that I always tell my students, and I always do it also in my presentation. I don't know if you've ever had the feeling that you go to a presentation and you get out of it and you think, this person is an amazing scientist, and I feel so much dumber now. They are great, and I am such a poor scientist that should quit my job. Right? I don't like those presentations. I like presentations in which I, as an audience member, get out of the room and feeling smarter. I'm like, oh, I learned something today. And I think we owe it to our audience that the audience has to get out of this room smarter than we came in. So don't be afraid to be didactic. Don't be afraid to be trivial. Yesterday, I think I gave a research talk and I explained things like absorption cross-section and scattering cross-sections. The physicists will probably understand it a million times better than me, but I needed those basic concepts, and I don't care if they feel like it's simple or stupid or trivial. Be didactic. So what I typically do is I introduce the topic at length. Half of my presentation is introduction. I think yesterday I spent half of the time introducing the topic. And if that makes little time to show how cool I am and how cool are my papers, that's okay. That's not the point. I want the audience to remember me and to have a great time and actually go home with something, right? Also, if you introduce your topic, go back, when you explain your research, go back to the introduction, right? If your introduction is completely unrelated to the topic, then it loses the connection. I work in energy, so every introduction of every thesis of every big bachelor and master student starts by saying, we need to save the world, climate change. And then the research is about measuring the scattering of a single nanoparticle. And I'm like, why is that connected? How are you saving the world by measuring the scattering of a single nanoparticle? That doesn't really add up. So make those links, help the audience to connect to that intro. And the final thing, make them feel smart. Right? Don't make them feel like you're super cool and you've done amazing things and the audience has only to catch up. I don't like that. I don't like that feeling as an audience, right? I've seen many presentations by great presenters and some presentations by some big professors, maybe from the United States, showing one paper per slide. It's a nature paper, it's a nature paper. I go home and I call it pretty much. I have published a single nature science paper. That's not the feeling that I want to convey in my presentation. I want you to be happy at the end and feel smart. Now, this is a big one. You want to start with something memorable and also end with something memorable. Somehow, human beings are tuned to be very sensitive to beginnings and ends. The first time that we meet somebody, or when we get out of a place. So ends and endings, beginning and endings are very memorable. So you have to be memorable. The first thing, start catchy. So tell something catchy. I didn't do a great job today. I think I'll try to do it better towards the end. I'll try to end with a bang, or at least with a good message. But start with something that really connects with the audience, right? Because that's the moment where you're the most memorable. Sometimes you feel, I don't know if you've ever seen it, in conferences or like symposia, there's always a chair that is introducing you when you give a talk, right? And so you give a talk and there's a title of your talk and in your name, and the chair has done a poor job. They don't know anything about you, they don't know anything about your background, they haven't looked at your abstract, they don't know the research that you did. And so the introduction that they do is, so now we have Andrea Baldi, who's going to talk about effective PowerPoint presentation. And then you go on the screen and I'm like, my name is Andrea Baldi, and I'm going to present an effective PowerPoint presentation, and everybody's like, we know. We heard it already, right? So have a start phrase, rehearse that. That's the most important point. That's the first impression you're going to make in front of an audience, right? So if I had done a better job, maybe I should have said something, I don't know, today I'm going to change the way you think about giving presentation forever. Let's catch your phrase. I am out of something, let me put that properly, but start with a bang and be ready to be introduced in a boring way, so you have to break the glass of being memorable. Also, end up on a high note. A lot of my master students and bachelor students, for example, when they do the final thesis presentation, of course they had a few months in the lab. They did some good measurements, but most of the measurements, I work in experimental physics, 90% of the time, nothing works. That's just life. And so some of them, they give a presentation, and at the end, the conclusion is all the stuff that didn't work. I'm like, are you sure that that's how you want to be remembered? I mean, talk about those things, but also talk about what are the few things that actually did work? What are the things that we're going to be doing in the future? Give us some goal. So always end on a high note, end with a bang. Yeah. Drop your mic like the other thing is, I don't know if you've ever heard, like when you're at a conference, very often the speaker is like towards the end says, well, so this is the end of my presentation. And I would like to thank you, and then someone starts clapping, and then I'll be very happy to take your question, and then another claps, and then it's all like little. No. When you're finished, I typically put the initial slide so they can see my email, and I say, thank you. And I shut up. And if you say, thank you, and then you be quiet, everybody knows that they have to applaud. And that's perfect. Right? That's all you want. You want an applause that starts as soon as possible. So just say thank you, and then okay, that's how we plan a presentation, but how do we structure it? What do we put into it? And so there are a few general questions, and again, I reiterate, if you have questions, please interrupt me, or if you don't agree with what I'm saying. A typical question is, how many slides do we put, right? Let's say that you are giving a PhD defense presentation, and you're given, I don't know, 15 minutes to present your research. How many slides? Well, my general rule is about one slide every 1.5 minutes that I'm given the opportunity, right? I have a 15-minute talk, I have 10 slides. Actually, one is going to be the title, where I introduce myself and I start with a bang. 4 slides are going to be the introduction. We said it before, introduction has to be very long. So I only have then 1 slide for conclusion or maybe outlook. So I have 4 slides to present my research. That's all I have. So I really have to pick my battles, right? So 1 slide every 1.5 minutes, more or less. And if you're too short, no one will raise their hand and say, oh no, please talk another 15 minutes, or please continue because your time is not up. But if you're too long, even by 30 seconds, people will want to choke you to death. And so, or they want to stand up and run away and go for coffee. So, too short is okay, too long, very much not okay. So you have to rehearse. Especially at conferences where there is many speakers in a day, and maybe you're given, a typical conference in my field is 15 minutes per speaker. So you have 12 minutes and 3 minutes of questions. And if you go over the 12 minutes, then your questions go away. If you go over 15 minutes, the chair will just drag you out of the stage and throw you away. You cannot be too long. Always prepare to be a little too short, if anything. Also, one slide should be one takeaway message, and that's it. Slides are for free in PowerPoint, right? If I have 30 slides, or if I have 40 slides, I don't pay a higher price to Microsoft. So if you put too many things in a slide, it becomes chaotic. And so one slide, one message, and we will see where we put the message. Now, okay, how do we structure the presentation? This is the way that I like to structure it, and I can imagine that this is going to be changing depending on your sensitivity. I should also say that I have learned many of these things from a science communicator, which is called Jean-Luc Dumont, and I'll put a QR code at the end so that you can actually go online and see for yourself what is this method. So the way I like to do it is as follows. At the beginning, I start with the big problem or the big general context. Why should everyone be interested? Not why should you be interested as my audience, why should everyone be interested? How does this connect to society? How does this connect to you? Not in your function today as, for example, a lecturer in the University of Indonesia or like an audience at a conference, but to you when you go home, to your family. Why should you want to talk about this to your family or to your friends? Right? The next step is, okay, it's relevant for everyone. Now we're going to narrow it down. Why is it relevant for the people in my field? What is the scientific challenge that we're trying to solve? Because if we're doing research, we're tackling a challenge, we're tackling a problem. There is something that needs to be done, right? So we start big and then we kind of go a little closer to our field of expertise. And once we establish the big question, then we say, well, this is how we solve it, right? So I'm telling you, well, this is super relevant for everybody. This is the problem that I'm trying to solve, and that's how I solve it, right? Great, now we are interested because it's relevant to us, we know what is the problem, we know that you're cool because you solve it. And then you can even add after that an outline if you need it. For example, telling, this is what I'm going to be talking about, right? Your outline should be structured as a story. Well, I'll show you what is a bad outline later on. And then there's the main body of the talk. So now the audience is listening because it's relevant to them, understood what is the scientific challenges, what you have done, and actually even know what's going to happen because we have the outline, right? So it's fully engaged. And once you have told the main story, where perhaps your slides where you show your experiments and you show what you learned, then you can draw your conclusion and maybe say what is going to come next. And you can repeat the main message. And again, here is your opportunity to think about the transformation, right? How did you enter into this room and how do I want you to get out of this room? Now, if you think about it, the first 3 steps is exactly what you should do when you write a scientific paper at the beginning of an abstract. And if you take, these big journal articles that are written for journals that are very generic, like Science and Nature. So if you publish in Science and Nature, it means that your discovery is relevant to the widest possible range of scientists. So take almost any abstract in these general journals, and it will look like this. So this is one that I took that was published a couple of months ago in Science. I know nothing about this paper. I don't care about this paper. But the first message is the big problem and the context. Climate change and human activities increasingly threaten lakes that store 87% of Earth's living surface fresh water. We all relate to this. This is important to everybody, right? Climate change is drying out our lakes, and this is fresh water that we need to do. Good. Everybody's on board. The second one is the scientific challenge. Yet, recent trends and drivers of lake volume change remain largely unknown globally. Now, if I were to talk to my wife, who's not a scientist, a communication scientist, and I tell her, you know that recent trends and drivers of lake volume change are typically unknown, she's like, I don't care. what are you talking about? But if I tell her climate change is drying out a lake, then my wife is engaged, right? Everything I do, I try to convince my wife to listen to me. Typically, when I talk about science to my wife, I talk to her back because she's just walking away. And I chase her, trying to explain what I do. Okay, this is the scientific challenge. We're narrowing it down. What is the open question that we're trying to answer? And then we get the solution. So here we analyze the 1972 largest global lakes using 3 decades of satellite observation, climate data, and hydrologic models, finding statistically significant storage declines for 53% of these water bodies over the period. Big challenge, scientific question, our solution. And then the outline, these were the first 3 parts of our story, right? Big problem, scientific challenge, our solution. Then we have the outline, then essentially what we have done. This is not something that I can control, this is your experiment. And the conclusion. Let me show you what is a bad outline and a bad conclusion. Now, the outline should be told like a story. This is an outline that I found online. Now, if the summary of your presentation is that introduction, method, results, and conclusion, we know. Get it out. That's not informative, right? This is not a story. This is just a list of obvious things that we all know that are going to happen, right? So, if you can, tell it like a story. The other thing, this was a conclusion that I found online. This was a slide. I have no idea what it's talking about, but I know that even if I were to be the biggest expert in the world on Tarsiva, I suppose Tarsiva is what we're talking about. Let's say I was the inventor of Tarsiva. If I had been sitting in a room for half an hour listening to a talk, and this was the last slide, this is what I would be doing. Like checking Instagram, checking TikTok, not another slide full of text, right? Don't end like this. This is not ending with a bang. End with a bang, and with a short message and driving on. Okay, this was how do we structure a presentation, right? Any questions so far? So I can take I'm sure that there is questions, so please do text them. Is this surprising, or is this like in line with what you expect when you construct a presentation, or do you do it differently? Yeah.
Sometimes we arrange it in an offline, something like that. So maybe do you have the good example for how what information is a very good? I think it's very a good. We put on the offline.
Yeah, I think that's very personal. Outline is something that I find many people, whenever I give this presentation, have different opinions on. So, for example, my outline is very minimalistic. It's this one, right? How to plan a presentation, structure, design, and deliver. When I give lectures, for example, I write down the main questions or topics that I talk about, and I typically put a little image as a visual memory. Let's say I gave a research talk yesterday, and I talked about what are plasma resonances, why and how they work, how did we use it. And so this outline kind of came back during the presentation so that I can also bring it with me as to where I am. And at the end, before I conclude, actually my conclusion is again the outline, but now I've changed the text. Instead of putting the questions that I'm going to touch upon, I write down what did we learn about that person. That's one way to do it. The other thing is sometimes, especially in conferences, you're not given a lot of time, right? If you have to give a 12-minute talk, there's no need for an outline, right? People, if you have done a good job at getting their interest by connecting to the general, big global challenge, and really being specific about the scientific problem you're trying to tackle and previewing what is your solution, they will be on board. They don't need to remember what's going to happen. They will follow you, right? So sometimes you don't need an outline. Actually, we don't use outline if I give talks that are between shorter than 20, 25 minutes. I don't need an outline. Does that answer a little bit your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Any other question? Let's take a few now. Or like comment. Very good. see a question over there. Question brewing. So, this science communicator that I often call Jean, he gives these talks. And then at the end, he asks for questions. And he gives talks to like audiences of hundreds of people, right? And so it's very scary to raise your hand in front of hundreds of people. So at the beginning, there is always a little bit of an awkward moment where nobody asks questions. And so he says, I don't believe in audiences without questions. And so I would just be staring at you awkwardly in silence until someone breaks and raises their hand. And then he does it. Like, I do it all the time. I mean, when it happens, I do it, and then I just do this. So maybe I'll continue now, but at the end, prepare your questions, or it will be super awkward until someone breaks. Okay, this is the part that I like the most, because I am ruthless in designing slides, and I also am ruthless with myself. If I were to fish the presentation that I gave in 2014 in front of Teddy, that he was very happy about, I would be astonished about how bad it is. These are a few of my recommendations on how to design slides. Now, the first thing, and the most important thing, is a lot of the stuff that we put on the slides is not needed. The first law of communication is adapt to your audience, right? The second law of communication is minimize noise. If I want to transfer a message, I want to maximize the signal and I want to minimize the noise. Anything that is not that message is noise. And so let's remove all the noise. Yeah. The third law of communication, I don't know if you noticed that there is not a lot of stuff on this slide, right? And I'm saying that the main message of the slide is to remove all the noise. And the third law of communication is effective redundancy. So adjusting your audience, minimize the noise, and use redundancy in an effective way. So, for example, what I need to say, what I'm saying in my words needs to align with what I'm putting on the slide. Remove all noise. I'm saying it twice, essentially, but they're aligned. If the title would say something different, you would have to either listen to me or read read what's written over there, or most likely, if the two are not agreeing, then you will start checking your phone. Now, once the presentation is ready, let's say that you have planned your presentation, you have exactly in mind what is your objective, who is your audience, what you want from them, how you want them to be transformed, and then you went through the structure. I'm going to put, I'm going to tell this and this big challenge and the scientific challenge and blah blah blah. Then you make your slide. So only then you make your slide, and then you maybe try the presentation, and then if you try and rehearse it, the next thing that you can do is go through your presentation and look at everything that is on your presentation that you did not have a chance to mention, to point at, to say out loud, to point with your fingers, and select in PowerPoint and click on the delete button, because that's just noise. You haven't had the time. Anytime you can delete something without loss of information, you should do it. Okay? Let me give you an example. Well, what are things to remove? Frames, boxes, they don't contain any information. Take them away. Headers and footers of slides. I don't know if you noticed, but at the beginning of this slide, there was only the title. There's no header, there's no footer, there's no background, there's no boxes anywhere. Right? Remove all noise. Your name, your affiliation, the institutional logo, is that relevant to the message of the slide that is remove all noise? That's a message. Whether I am Andrea or whether I'm Francesco, it doesn't matter. Remove all noise. Whether I work at the Universitas or whether I work at the University of Indonesia, it doesn't matter. The message is remove all noise.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yes, please.
Something, so I have to put on the institutional logo and all the slide in my presentation, because something like that mandatory in my institution.
Yes, be a rebel. Put it at the beginning slide, put it at the end, and then during the presentation, no bureaucrat will stand in your presentation. They will get out of it. They will check your title slide. Or, if they ask you for the slide, just put it back in all the slides. Be a rebel. Change everything.
Yeah, because sometimes we have the official template.
Oh,
Yeah.
I also have the official template. Absolutely, the Vrije Universiteit has the official template. It looks absolutely nothing like this.
Yeah.
It has boxes and institutional logos and colors, and I don't care. Yeah. Be a rebel. Don't follow your bosses. Don't follow your guys supervisor. Don't follow your professors. Have you ever been to a scientific conference? What do you think about the quality of these slides? I think it's abysmal. I think it's horrible. I think, we scientists are terrible at designing things and at giving exciting presentations. So let's change it. That's not the work we have done in the past. If you must put a logo, what I would do, I would put it as small as possible. What else? Transition effects other than appear and disappear. Sometimes you see equations that are like bouncing, rotating, and sliding. And of course they're catchy, right? They attract your attention. But they attract the attention of the wrong thing. Because people will think, how in the hell did he do it? What kind of effect is that bouncing thing? They're not looking at the equation, they're not looking at the story behind the equation, or what's written on the slide, they're just thinking, oh, I should use that software more often, right? Redundant plot labels, we will get into that. I'll show you what I think I mean by that. Sometime we'll get there. Also, anything smaller than font 12. That's also why I wanted everybody in the back to come closer. This is a kind of an awkward situation where the room is very long, and so I hope that you can see what is written here, but I assume not. Awesome, thank you. Also, equations that you did not describe. Someone said every time you put an equation on a slide, you lose half of the audience. So if you have 3 equations, you're already like at 12% or something. So if you don't have time to describe, just take it away. Also, text that you did not explain. Like any text that is not there, or that doesn't align with what I'm saying, it should go away. Now, I love this exercise. This is a slide that I prepared in 2008. I was in my 3rd year of PhD, and I thought I was a great presenter. Right? Now, it looks like this. Oh.
This is very common.
This is very common. I don't know if you recognize it, right? Now, I don't want to be arrogant, but I'm sure that if I were to ask you to send me your latest PowerPoint presentation, I will find a slide that kind of looks like this. Okay? I was one of them. Okay, I don't know exactly. So the main message of this slide is actually that if you want to measure the short-range order, somehow Exas has something to do with it. Okay? I don't know. Now, how would I change it today? Let me show you. First of all, what was I thinking? Like, this is the equation for Exas, which is a quantum mechanical equation. I didn't have time to explain any of this in my presentation. So that goes away. Better, right? Second of all, I work at the Vrije Universiteit back then, but does me working at the Vrije Universiteit have anything to do with how Exas measure the chemical short-range order? No, so that goes away. Also, my email, I mean, unless you really need to send me an email at the moment that I'm talking to you about Exas, that can go. I can put it in the title slide or the final slide. Also, I think we all remember where we were, right? We were sitting in this place back then. I don't need to remind you what day it is and where we're sitting. You know, right? It's not the right place, so this goes away. Boxes are noise. Boxes go away. Also, titles. This is a big one. This is perhaps the biggest message that I have, one of the biggest messages I have. Now, titles of slides, they should be complete sentences. And they should convey the so what message. Not the what I have done, but so what? What have I learned? Right? So this title is saying I did Exas. Instead, it should say, what do we learn from Exas? Right? And so also there is boxes, there is a separator here, so remove boxes, separators, lines, everything is noise. It's not information. If I cancel it, there's no information lost. So the title is Extended X-ray Absorption Fine Structure, or Exas, measures the chemical short-range order in binary alloys. Now this is a little technical maybe for this audience, but in the context of that conference and of my talk, that was completely understandable, and that's the takeaway message. And I'm also telling you, right, when we use Exas, which is an X-ray absorption technology, Then we can measure the chemical short range order in alloys that are composed of two elements, or binary alloys. I'm redundant, I'm telling you what is written on the title, you're not distracted. Other things, what do you see still that is problematic? Okay. Yeah, the graphs are kind of funny. But also, you see that here I'm using, I think this is a aerial. This is an equation that is probably taken from LaTeX. This is, I think, Calibri. So way too many fonts and font sizes, right? Use one font and be consistent with the font sizes. Okay, so chemical short range order is this equation right here, and then these citations, the references with the same font. It's a different font size, but this is citations, that's okay. Another thing that I noticed, this figure is extending all the way to the edges. And sometimes projectors, they cut out the edges, and you see that some material is outside. Now, you don't need to fill the slide. There's not enough empty space, so make it a little smaller. This is much more noisy than this. This is much cleaner and easier and pleasant to look at. Another thing is, why is the text below? It's not very logical, let's put it up. And also, if you look at the labels, as Ferry was saying, the labels, there are different fonts, so let's try to make all the fonts in the label, we edit them as well. I actually put white patches or crop the images. I don't care, I'm not publishing these figures, right? I don't need to be scientifically accurate. I don't need to show all the data that are coming out of my Origin or MATLAB or whatever plotting software that I'm using. I can edit everything. This is a presentation. And so I put all the labels like this. Now, do you remember how it looked like? Right? This is extremely noisy. It's a slide that is screaming, and it's screaming stuff that I don't understand. This is a slide that says X measures the chemical short range order. I know what it is. That's a cool figure. I can explain it. The title is so what, and the figure is one message. It's much clearer. That's how I would obtain my slides. Some of the things about removing all noise is extra text. This is a typical thing that we need to tell our students. There's way too much text. And if there's way too much text, humans are incapable of listening and reading. No one can do it, right? So if I put text on a slide, the only way that you can read it is if I shut up. If I stand still, I don't see anything, and I let you read whatever it is. Unless what I'm saying is exactly aligning with what is written. So, first of all, avoid any excessive text. It's impossible to read on this. Use effective redundancy. Second law of communication. Actually, third law of communication. Adjust to your audience, maximize signal, minimize noise, use effective redundancy. So, if the text should align with what I say, right? I'm putting some text on the slide that I'm going to read very slowly, I'm making it appear, and I'm repeating what I'm writing there. So you're not distracted. And finally, the slide title. Again, the slide title is what you have learned, not what you have done. It's the so what message. It's not what message. Okay? Also, another couple of things. The titles is best if it's a complete sentence, not broken down. Like, I'm going to give you an example of a bad title and good titles, and you tell me if you think it's better. It's fine if it's a little longer. Of course, short titles are fantastic. Like before, there was a slide that had the title "Remove all noise." That message is clean and powerful. Sometimes, especially in research like Excel measures the chemical short range order in binary alloys, that is the message of my slide. And it's fine to break it into 2 lines, but break it logically. So it's not fine if you break it, halfway. For example, if I'm here and I had written extended X-ray absorption fine, and then next line, structure X measures the chemical short range order, that's not logical. So always break it logically. And 2 lines is okay, 3 lines, not okay. It's too long. In fact, 2 lines is already very long, right? So if you write in 2 lines, you have to be careful, you have to repeat and make sure that you are using effective redundancy. Yeah? Okay. Slide in which the title is How to Choose Slide Titles in Effective PowerPoint Presentations. Who thinks this is a good title? Who thinks this is a bad title? I know you do. Someone else. Why is this a bad title?
Title do not represent the inside of the slide, right?
Right.
Like the title is not it's not like how to what we want to explain in the PowerPoint.
The title is not a takeaway message.
Yes.
It's actually telling us, I'm going to tell you what is the takeaway message. Also, is it broken logically? Right? How to choose slide titles in effective PowerPoint presentations. Not really logical. Right? It's a bad title. It describes the what, not the so what. The line break is not logical. It is also not a complete sentence. How to choose, that's schematic sentence, right? Now look at this title. Slide titles should be short sentences that convey a so what message. Is this a better title? Yes. It describes the takeaway message, and the line break is logical, and it is a complete sentence. Okay. This is a much better title. How about this? Temperature-dependent X-ray diffraction of titanium dioxide. Good title or bad title? Bad title. What is bad? What is particularly bad?
To show the what.
Yeah. It's about the what, right? What have you done? So we measure X-ray diffraction on titanium dioxide and we vary the temperature. That's what we did. But then what did you learn, right, when you did that? What did you discover when you did the temperature-dependent measurement? And maybe, so this is a bad title, describe what you have done, not what you have learned. It's also not a complete sentence, it's just a statement or a title of a figure if you want. Maybe what you learn is that titanium dioxide undergoes a phase transition for temperatures above 500 degrees C. That's what you learn by doing temperature-dependent XRD of titanium dioxide. So that should be the title of your slide, the takeaway message. Essentially, the title of your slide should consider the transformation of your audience within that slide. What is that main message, that takeaway message that you're going to give? That's your title. This is much better. Describes what you have learned, the line break is logical, and the sentence is complete. So, whenever possible, try to make the title of your slide the takeaway message, making it into a short and powerful sentence and memorable. And that should be, more or less, the only text that you have in your slide. That is your title. You put the figure here. In this case, I would put probably different X-ray diffraction patterns measured at different temperatures, and probably something will happen above 500 degrees C, and that's it. That's my slide. And then I can talk on it. Because remember that the presentation is not there, the presentation is here. You should be listening to me. And then that is only reinforcing with effective redundancy what I'm saying. Now, one time I was at a conference and I saw this slide. What do you think of this now? This is BSC, I have no idea, I don't remember what that is. But it's apparently these field effect transistors based on quantum dots made of lead selenide were free of BSC. I don't care. I mean, I'm already stopped listening after the fact.
The only real one is free.
Yeah.
The rest are
Yes. It gets worse. There was a PhD applicant who gave a presentation in my group, and this was one of the titles of your slide. DDR3TBDTT.
Oh, even you can.
Needless to say, they did not get the position, right? That was not a good idea. Another thing that I see very often in many presentations, I don't know, I'm a physicist and a chemist. I think physicists are colorblind somehow, like their choice of color is abysmal. I'm not going to comment on which color you're going to use, but try to minimize.
Those that are laughing, I think that's the
Hello?
Yeah, I think those
Oh,
are
yeah,
laughing.
lots of colors, like rainbows everywhere.
They always use Canva.
Yeah.
So many things there. Me too.
I got no comment on your choice of color palette. However, if you use 15 different colors in your presentation, that is very chromatically noisy. So my recommendation is use maximum 3 colors, and you can use their gradations, and that's totally fine. And that allows you to have a palette of colors. For example, if you're using a white background, you can definitely use black with all the gradations of gray. I don't know if you noticed, my references were all in gray, a little bit below. That's okay, that's the same color as black, it's not noisy. You can use dark red and dark blue with all their gradations. Of course, you should avoid to use very light colors, like yellow, light green, light blue. I'm sure that in the back, this sentence, this yellow here, written in yellow, is hard to read. Right? I don't know. I would love to go there. Is it hard to read yellow? A bit, okay. Now, this is if you use a white background. Sometimes people use a black background. Well, okay. In a black background, again, use maximum 3 colors with their gradations. You can use white and all the gradations of gray. Now you can use yellow or light green. Of course, you have to avoid blue. I'm sure you cannot read the word blue right here. Written blue or dark red or dark green. So choose your bow and be consistent throughout your presentation. Having a million colors is noisy. It distracts from the main message. Right? Another thing is use structure in a logical way. PowerPoint loves lists, bullet points, pointed lists. Don't use bullet points if there is not a list. And usually there is not a list, right? This is not a list. Why would I use bullet, right? But somehow it's so easy to, even in some formats of PowerPoint presentation, as you create a text to write text, there's already a bullet point in it. Why? I mean, if it's not a list, don't use bullet point. Even if it's a list, don't use a bullet point. I mean, in my opinion, if you can make it look like a list without a bullet point, you have deleted something without loss of information, so that's a good thing. Avoid multiple indentations. Try to align everything into one point. 2 indentations are one too many. Like, this is way too noisy. Like, you have way too much structure, probably way too much text already in your slide. Try to use only one font throughout the whole presentation. If you start mixing up a million fonts, that's very noisy. You want to minimize them. Also, limit yourself to 3 font sizes. I typically do titles, normal text, and this is small text. Stuff that can be on a reference, maybe a small label in a graph. Now, very often we ask ourselves, how big is too big or how small is too small, right? We see very often plots where the labels are too small to appreciate, and that's a key, right? A general rule that usually works is you can do this. You print your slides in handout mode. If you print them in handout mode in PowerPoint, you can select that you have 6 slides in one A4. If you print it like that, and you can read it, if you have normal vision, I'm starting to lose, I'm getting old, I need to get it always further away, but if you can read it, when it's printed in 6 slides in an A4, typically it will be read by anybody in the audience. So that's not too small. I usually use like 12 point for the smallest text. Maybe it's even too small sometimes. I'm sure that people in the back have a hard time reading this thing. So for a room like this, it wouldn't work. So be mindful and use big labels. Another thing that is very often done is we tend to use all the real estate of the space of the slide.
Slides are free.
Slides are free, right? I mean, this is not an expensive real estate. I can just, insert new slide. So give empty space a chance. Actually, empty space is not empty. I don't know if you've ever seen the ads of Apple. Apple computers, they don't have a lot of, now I put like sticker things. I hate this.
What is it?
I hate this sticker. But a student of mine gave it to me. And I thought, I love the fact that I hate this because I'm getting contaminated by my students. So it's a reminder of how much I care for them. But Apple has this very neat design. You don't need a lot of symbols, right? So one message and one figure per slide. Don't put more messages, don't put more figures. If your message is titanium dioxide undergoes a phase transition for temperatures above 500 degrees C, just show the XRD. Don't show also the EDX or, I don't know, the sample preparation on a side, and here maybe a little image of the laboratory. We don't care. The main message is that there is a phase transition at 500. That's your only graph. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't belong. You're fighting the wrong battle, right? Don't try to fit everything into a slide. Let me show you the difference between a slide that is too full. This was a slide that I presented at the conference. It relates to the field of study that Terry and I actually work together. It has to do with hydrogen. It doesn't matter at all what's written in the title and what's the graph. This slide is shouting at you the message, right? You're kind of bombarded by this slide. Now, this slide, it's much better. This slide, okay, now we're having a quiet conversation. I'm not screaming my results at you. This slide is perfect. Now, the main message is over there. I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to say it with my voice, and I can actually, everything, is not screaming, and I'm not filling it up until the end. This is much better than it used to be. Right? This is very noisy. This is very good. And it's a simple thing, right? It doesn't cost us anything. In fact, we're actually making things slightly smaller.
Andrea, how about the page number? Sometimes the audience want to ask something, then they want to, how to say, please show the page number, something like that. Right?
Yeah.
So how about the page number?
Great question. I always discuss about this. I think this is really a matter of personal choice, in a way, and also a matter of circumstance. So, for example, when I give lectures, I usually include page numbers. Sometimes I forget. And that is very useful for students, because students maybe they want to write down some notes on a specific thing that you said, and they want to reconnect to that page number. Also, I use page numbers. I usually, for very short presentations. So I was at this conference in May in the United States in July last year, and I was presenting a poster. This is a Gordon Research Conference, so it's only invited speakers. I was not invited. But then my poster was selected for a short poster presentation the last night. So I had 10 minutes. And so I know that I'm not the highlight of the day, right? I know that the audience is not there to listen to me. So the worst thing that I can do is go over time. And also the worst thing that I can do is that the audience is thinking, oh, he may be going over time. So what I've done, I've included slide numbers. And I've actually included, I had 10 minutes, so I had, I think, 9 slides. I had 1 out of 9, 2 out of 9, 3 out of 9, so the people knew that I was perfectly in time, right? And so I use slide numbers in that way. It's fine to have slide numbers, and sometimes you need them, right? But honestly, if your audience has to use a slide number to remember what you were talking about, maybe you're not memorable enough, right? So sometimes you don't need, just tell your story, people will connect to that story.
Yeah, but if I may add on that position, I tend to use slide numbers because it is helpful not only for the audience but also for the presenters. Because in most cases within conferences, of course, you have questions, but then sometimes you write, okay, this question comes from slide number 9. I need maybe for information for them. But then when we mention, can you go back to slide 9? It's easier for us also to, as a student, indeed, yeah, like this. So I mean, we also need these numbers so we can directly go to that slide. Maybe most don't know, but we can always press numbers and enter, then it will go back to that slide. Because otherwise, the annoying thing with the conference, maybe you know, Andrea, if people go back just by clicking the backward button.
Yeah.
Then they have the slides are 60s with 5 transition in between, so they have to other times before I go back.
Yeah.
So I think slide numbers are really helpful.
Absolutely. I'm not advocating against slide numbers, but if slide numbers are not conveying any useful information, then take them out. And yes, this is a really good suggestion. When you're in PowerPoint mode, if you just type the number and then enter, it goes to that slide number. So for example, now I'm 57, if I do 1 enter, we go back to this, but then I want to go back to 57, I go to 57 enter. Very useful. So actually, you should also typically find, like giving for example, a proposal presentation, where I have like 5 minutes, and I need to be as memorable exactly which slide number corresponds to what. So when the audience is asking me questions, just do, they don't even see it good. Just the slide appears on the screen. Okay, another thing that that we do work a lot is on changing every graph. And I'm going to use some examples that I took from the internet. So the first recommendation that I have is minimize the number of labels. So if the number of labels is larger than the number of data points, then you have too many. And also choose the right label. Let me show an example. This was ACS Nano paper last year. Now, how many data points do they have? 7, right? How many Y labels do they have? 11. Do we need to know, first of all, I mean, the data points are between 640 and 670. Do we need to know 500, 500, 200, 540, 560, 500? I think that's too much, right? Also, none of these data points connect to any of those nodes. And also, why are these two things here in boxes? Actually, so boxes are noise, as we know. So, way too many labels. Also, none of the timelines connect to any of the timeline, right? I don't think this corresponds to, I don't know, to 40, I don't know. Yeah, you see, it's not really, it's probably a 43, 44 hours. Make your labels, align with the data points. So if your message is, let's try to understand, over the course of 140 hours, let's forget about this one, this is way too complicated, let's look at the first 6 points. Over the course of 140 hours, my peak intensity decreases from 670 to 650. I should at least have 670 and 650 in the Y label, and maybe a couple in between if needed, right? Everything else is way too much information. So make sure that your labels are not overwhelming your data and they're chosen strategically. Also, I have a personal fight against legends. Like legends, I would say label each term individually, and if you don't have space to do that, you're plotting too many things. So use 2 plots. Now, this is another paper. I just took it, randomly. Okay, there is a legend, ITO nanocrystals, I assume, talk treated, whatever, and then these 3 lines. What legends make you do is going back and forth from the data that contains the information that I want to convey to somewhere else. And you have to do that exercise 3 times. Because then I do ITO, okay, ITO is black, and NCS nanocrystals is red, and then blue. And you see, I'm distracted by the main message that could be, these 2 have a peak at 580, and this one has a peak at 480. And actually what I would do is maybe, plot it in such a way here, I would put ITO, and maybe here with a little arrow, I would put talk treated, and maybe with a red arrow, I would put NC nanocrystal, and I would get rid of 600, get rid of 500, and put, the label here. I can maybe have 400 and 700 as the extremes, but this peak is at 480, and then I write here 480, I cancel this, and this is, maybe I can have 2 little labels. This would be, 570, maybe 572. And that is the main message, right? The other thing is minimize noise again. Like very often we see grids, we see a number of colors, we see 2 small labels. Clean your graphs and do everything in your power to clean your graph. Use any software that you can. PowerPoint, Origin, MATLAB, Python, anything. Like have an image of the graph that you want to convey. Think about what is the takeaway message of that graph, and then clean it the best way possible. Now, for example, this is a paper, again, in the same journal, same edition. Now, they're beautiful graphs, but for example, first of all, the labels are way too small. This was also in the paper, it was kind of hard to read, especially like this 4.25, like this is leading 4.2, that number is almost unreadable even in the paper, even when you submit it. And secondly, why do they all have different colors? There's no way to mix them up, right? They're at different heights. They already separated them. So the only thing that these colors are doing is just adding noise. Right? So forget about the color. There's many things. Also, yeah, what I was saying before, be ruthless. Like, edit your graphs thoroughly. For papers, of course, you have to be accurate and consistent, so you cannot manipulate data at all. But you can make it, you can edit it the way you want, and it still be true to your data. For PowerPoint presentation, you can, I cancel. If I take a graph from a different paper that I want to cite, I do crazy things to it. I don't care. As long as the takeaway message is what I want to give, that's fine. And as long as I remain true to the reference that I'm recording. Yeah. Now, for example, this is a graph that I've produced with MATLAB, I think. What do you think of this graph? It's bad. I mean, it's terrible. What is particularly bad about it? It's inconsistent. Yeah, there is many things happening. What is happening? I heard something of that. What was it? You're suggesting, but it's too low. What do you see as problems? Too many colors. Yes. We have black, we have blue, red, and green. Too many colors. What else? Not enough information? Possibly, yeah. And maybe the information that there is confusing and not exactly what we need. What else? Numbers are too small. Like in the back, you cannot read these tables. What else? This is way bigger. It actually looks ugly with that. What else? Sorry? Yeah, the fonts. I think it's probably the same font, but the font sizes are not the same. Maybe that's a different font even. Yeah. There's also a legend. And I said I hate legends. Right? Also, we have our beautiful data. We put it in prism, as Jean-Luc Dumont says. We put the grid on top of it, just to cancel, to remove it. Yeah. There's way too many labels, by the way. Also on the Y, this is an intensity. Actually, these two peaks, they all go to 1. Probably that's a normalized intensity, so maybe it just needs 0 and 1. You don't need anything else. It's also copy-pasted from MATLAB. I took it from MATLAB, actually made it ugly on purpose, and I just didn't do anything to it. Now, let's try to make it better. This is the same plot, it's the same data, but now there's only 2 colors. There's 1 font and 1 font size. There are no legends of grids. Before it said peak 1, peak 2, peak 1 plus 2. But honestly, yeah, this is 1, this is 2, and that's the sum of the 2. Easy to make without a legend. Only the relevant numbers are plotted. This is relevant because that's the center of peak 1. 600 is relevant because that's the center. That's all we need. We don't need to know 550, 650, and 750. That's way too much information. The fonts are easy to read, and I edited very heavily. Actually, I've done it in PowerPoint. In PowerPoint, I just created like a curve system that does this. Yeah. I don't care. No one, and I'm not publishing this, of course. Right? This is a PowerPoint presentation. I want to convey the message that 1 plus 2 gives this double E. That's all I want to give. Right? Okay, so be ruthless. Clean up everything. Clean up your slide, clean up your graphs, focus on the takeaway message. Now, the final part of the talk, the final thing that I wanted to say is, okay, we have planned the presentation, we have a good idea of what we want from the presentation, what I want from you, what you want from me, what is your background. I have structured it properly, my slides look amazing, I went through a couple of times and I deleted everything that was not needed or I didn't have time to discuss. Now it's time to get the heart rate up and actually to faint in front of your audience or not. Like you have to resist, you have to survive. So how do we deliver the talk? Now, the first and perhaps the most important message is you are the presentation. In this case, I am the presentation. Okay? These are the slides that back me up. In fact, this is just, this is effective redundancy. According to Jean-Luc Dumont, this guy that I always quote, someone should be able to give the same presentation without the slides. So suppose my computer catches fire and this presentation is gone, I should have been able to give exactly the same presentation without the slides. And maybe I could have done it, but maybe not. But you should, right? So the presentation is here. And I have many tricks to kind of gather the attention. One thing is to be on the side of the slide, but also in front of it. The other one is, for example, to be with arms at 90 degrees, which is what news anchor do. Like, I'm not standing like that at all. This is awkward. This feels like I want to run away from this room. I'm also not dancing. Just being composed, arms at 90 degrees, works all the time. The other thing, sometimes I'm using the pointer, but I'm trying to avoid that. In fact, I'm trying to point to things and then bring it back to me. And the reason for it, there is many reasons. Actually, the pointer is the worst enemy if you're nervous. I don't know if you ever had it, like you're presenting, and then your pointer is like, and then you try to hold it with 2 hands, and you look like Luke Skywalker trying to fight your presentation. Yeah, don't do that. And also the other thing, it's very hard for me to focus your attention on something that is very far away, and then make sure that you come back to where the presentation actually is. However, if I do this, and I focus your presentation on the top left, and then I do this, and I come back here, you will follow me. This is a trick that magicians do all the time. I can do that with kids that are about 3 years old, and at 4 they already get it. But like the position where, like, if I want to make this disappear to a kid, I'll just pretend that I've taken it, and they will look where I look. Right? And the same is with presentation. You will look where I'm pointing at. So leave slide preparation to the end. First, you have to plan the structure. Eyes should be on you. Ears should be on you. And the presentation. Also, how do we manage stress? There are a few ways. Well, first of all, if you follow this advice, you will be very ready to give an amazing presentation, right? And that's already going to lower your stress. Of course, you have to rehearse, you have to practice. Ask your colleagues. No? Well in advance, ask your colleagues, can you listen to my presentation? And put yourself in a position as close as possible to the real thing. If you know the rooms where you're going to practice, go into that room. Right? So take care of yourself. Like, don't leave anything at the last minute. Don't do an all-nighter just before the presentation. Go do whatever it is that relaxes you. For me, like, go climbing. I go climbing. Also, know your enemy, right? So know the room where you're going to talk. If you know that you're going to have a job interview, and you can look at the room where you're going to have a job interview, go and have a look at it. And picture yourself in that situation. That's going to lower the stress the moment you're going to end up into it. Or if you're giving a talk at a conference, go and look at the room in which you're going to give your talk. And maybe see other people that are giving a talk in that room before you. And then go on stage and look at how it's going to feel. Imagine yourself in that situation. Also, accept the tension. I mean, if you're nervous and stressed, it means you can, right? There's nothing that you can do about it. Right? If you wouldn't care, then you wouldn't be stressed. But we have to accept that. The thing is, if you're ready, you're going to be stressed before. You're going to have a fast heart rate, and maybe a dry mouth. But once you are here, I know exactly what I'm doing because I planned it. I structured it. My slides look amazing, and I'm exactly where I want to bring you. So I'm ready. Of course I'm stressed. I care about this, but I am ready. And so as soon as I start talking, the stress will fade away, and you'll be ready to give your talk. Actually, you will be wanting. You can't wait to go on stage. Also, sometimes there's questions, and so how do we handle questions? Very often I see, a student that gives a talk, and maybe there's a big professor that is interested, and maybe the big professor she's asking, I want to ask this question, and then the student is like talking on top of her, and I'm like, just be quiet, listen to it. Like, it's so important when someone is interested to your work. So I would say the first recommendation is when someone asks a question, listen and be grateful that there is someone that is actually interested in what you're doing. Acknowledge their question. That is a great question. Thank you. Because if you acknowledge the question, some other person will be, will feel at ease at asking the question. And also, it's really nice when someone asks a question, right? It means that they have been engaged with your presentation. Also, sometimes questions can be harsh. I don't know if you've ever been into the Netherlands, but Dutch people can tend to be very direct. And so you can get questions like, oh, that was stupid. What can you do? Well, the major advice that I feel is just remain calm and avoid confrontation at all costs. Just say, I think, I would be very happy to discuss this after the talk. And remain technical, do not engage. Hopefully this doesn't happen. I often mention Jean-Luc Dumont, and I want to put here the resources in case you are interested to either scan the QR code, but I'm going to send the slides to Ferry so that you can also find these resources from the PDF. You can ask Ferry. Jean-Luc Dumont, this is a fantastic scientific communicator. He did his PhD in applied physics at Stanford University. He's from Belgium. And I first met him actually at Stanford when I was a postdoc there. And he gave this seminar that really blew my mind. He gave essentially everything that I told you. Like even the good jokes are from him. Like I'm not that funny. Sometimes you laugh, those good jokes are from him. He gives these amazing lectures on how to give presentations. And what I'm telling you is essentially what he's taught me over the course of a couple of seminars at Stanford, and also I invited him in the Netherlands because he's nearby. He wrote this fantastic book, 3 Smart Scientists, and there is also some free available material in the website that you can download, some PDF leaflet that kind of summarizes this main concept. There's also this Twitter, scientist on Twitter, Tessa Davies. She's a science communicator, and she tweeted this tweet 1 year ago, providing 7 tips to make your presentations shine every single time. And I felt that this tweet was really amazing. And you will see that there is also some overlap between the recommendations that come from an expert in scientific communication from these two. And I thought that I wanted to share these resources with you. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry said, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. This is essentially my main message and my conclusion. Thank you.
So, thank you, Andrea. I think this is really an amazing talk. I think he delivered, so it's not a scare. So really, I think you agree that this presentation on itself is really amazing, and the topics that you implementing is really practical. Like I said, I work with Andrea, so my slides are heavily influenced by all of these slides because I watch it firsthand that it's really effective and it's really engaging. So I really hope that small part of it, if not all, you can bring home and immediately use it in your next presentation because it really have a difference. So maybe we still have time, and I think this is really your last chance because Andrea today is his last day. After 4 tiring days, tomorrow we are going for vacations. I will bring Andrea around and see the beauty of Indonesia. So today is your last day to ask questions. But maybe I will ask questions for you, Andrea, first, because a lot of here are teachers, lecturers, basically. I also I teach, but then in some of my classes now I also try to not only giving knowledge based on the courses, but I also want the students to excel in presentation because this is really important. So I give tips and tricks if there is like projects in the presentation and we do discussions and also inputs from there. So hopefully after the course is finished, they also get the skills. But one question was being raised, like, do you have differences between presenting for example, for talks like this, or when you prepare presentation for class?
Yeah.
And this is my answer to him. Yes, I did, because this is usually done if you want to catch attention, and basically the source is not given to the audience, right? So you really have this 10 minutes time to attract everything. But then when I teach classes, of course the slides will be different. The message is the same, one slide message, very clean, shouldn't be confusing. But then I tend to put text that are necessary, because in my mind it's like, at the end of the day, these slides will be converted to PDF, and this will be their source for them to learn and become science. So they need as complete information as it can be. So this is my approach, but do you have any opinion on that?
Absolutely. I mean, the opinion is the first law of communication. The first law of communication is adjust to your audience. You may even argue that when you give a lecture to students, you don't have an audience. You have a community of students and professors that are learning together and possibly learning from each other, right? So, of course, the suggestion that I proposed today, for example, for slide design, can be used, right? If you want to make a slide for your students, certainly, if you remove the noise and you maximize the message and you put the message as the main title, it's going to help them. However, the outline of a storyline starting with a big scientific challenge, that may totally not be appropriate to a lecture. In fact, right now, there is the tendency in our university to try to flip the classroom.
Yeah.
So we ask the students to engage with material that can be lecture notes or a book chapter before the class, and then in class we just discuss. We ask them questions and we go through the parts of the book or the lecture notes that they did not understand. And so, in a way, this is very different, right? I said very often, I am the presentation, but in a lecture, I am not the presentation, right? A lecture is a community of teachers and students learning from each other, and so it's a completely different thing.
And so approach, again, the first rule is just the audience, so that's the first golden rule. But then all technicalities might be different, but the things, there are many aspects in this presentation and the tips that you get that might enhance the communication process.
Yes, I think so.
Any questions? We only have 25 minutes before Andrea leave UI, and I don't know when he will come back. So use your chance. Please, this one.
Listen here and then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for the chance. Honestly, I'm here to increase my presentation skills to promote defense soon because I feel like my last proposal defense is so bad. And for this defense, sometimes we have introduction and purpose and have main purpose in it, and it must be like we write it in list. But you said that remove the list or like that. And sometimes in the text defense also, we have limited time in there, but we have more analysis to explain to the professor. I think. What is the tips and tricks that we can deliver it effective, but not so long.
Yeah.
Not take so long.
Yeah. So of course, I mean, I advocate for rebellion. I hate power, so I always say rebel to whatever they tell you to do. Rebel to the template. Forget about what your professors are saying. Having said that, I also acknowledge that I'm in a position of privilege because I'm already a professor myself. And so by all means, if you're required, I mean, in a way, it goes back to the first law. Adjust to your audience. And also think about what do you want from them. So if your audience is a bunch of professors and what they want from you is a list of proposals, that's what you have to give them, right? Otherwise, I mean, and what is it that you want from them? Well, you want the best grade possible, or you want to pass, right? And so adjust your expectations to what your audience is going to expect. Within the limits of what is reasonable, my content is that scientific presentations are terribly boring and ugly. And they don't need to be. They can be exciting, they can be telling a story, they can be entertaining, and they can be beautiful. So within the boundaries of what is possible and reasonable, maybe there are some recommendations in this presentation that you can use also in your PhD proposal.
I think you haven't answered the second part of the question.
Oh, yeah.
Given limited time, so what?
Oh.
What is your background? Are you a master?
You're a master.
Yeah, to give you some perspective, I mean, this is a really common problem, but this is not to be creative. I'm sorry, so this one, not answer, but I can build on this.
Yeah.
But would you imagine, like, if you do a PhD in the Netherlands, you have 4 years of research, But then you have to present it what, within 10 minutes?
10 minutes.
So your problem is it's very easy compared to what the PhD student.
I mean, if you're applying for an ERC starting grant, which is 1.5 million euros, it's the biggest grant you can get when you start your career. You're in 5 minutes to present your research.
So yeah, this is the
So
advice.
it's always a choice. And so how much time do you have? And you're presenting your master thesis and you're given little time? That's what I understood. How much time do you have? 15 minutes for the whole presentation. And then there is questions. Yeah, the way I would do it is spend at least 5 minutes introducing the topic. At least. Not 7 minutes introducing the topic. And however, it also depends who is in your audience, right? So who will be sitting in your presentation? Is it just your professor? 3 professors. Do they all have the same background? Yeah, that's a good information, right? So maybe you can extend the introduction or adjust the introduction in such a way that it caters to all 3 of them. And then, once you've done your title slide and the introduction, maybe 5 minutes, then you have maybe 1 slide at the end for conclusions and outlook. So you have, what is it, like 8 slides, 9 slides? And build a story as exciting as possible with your results. And you have 9 sentences, essentially, 9 titles, 9 takeaway messages. That's what you do. It's all about fun. Choose your battle. Pick up, the gems in your research.
But I think if I may add, sometimes the tendency is to present everything.
Oh,
because
yeah.
this is very psychological to us. I mean, this is also deep to us because we have been working so much. We think that everything needs to be told because we did sacrifice to get this data. So people has to see it, right? It's like I don't want to lose this data. I want to show it because it took me 2 weeks to get this one. But then on the bigger picture, it's not needed to tell the whole story.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, I often have that. Even when people write papers, they write every single experiment they've done. I was a PhD student. I wrote a paper. It had 17 figures. We sent it to physical review meeting. Good job. It contains metaphysics. I get the review back. One of the reviewers like, the paper's perfect. Everything checks, but it's so boring. Like, please cut it out. Like, make it more readable. Like, if you want to say that you did a lot of things, make it into a joke. Have a slide in which you put all your results. And you say, this is everything that I've done. I could bore you to death describing every single experiment, but let me condense it into one good storyline. And then you've shown that you've done a bunch of stuff, but now you're going to tell a good story. Right? We don't want to know everything you've done. You definitely don't want to know everything I've done. 90% of what I do is it fails. And it's fine. And that's exactly how we learn. Now, it could also be that the good storyline is, I've done this experiment and it didn't work. And then we started thinking, why did it work? So I'm not saying that you should only present the stuff that worked, but present a good story. And by all means, don't show everything you have done. No one would be interested. And so you can show everything you have done, but if no one is listening, it's like showing nothing. So, you had a question?
Suppose I have my thesis defense presentation, and someone in the audience they ask a question, and I'm not really sure about that question. So how to deal with it in a polite way? Like I'm not sure about a question. So how to deal with it in a polite way?
I mean, yeah.
So it was a defense presentation.
Oh, in a defense. So my question is from one of your professors.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's a tough situation, right? Because you're on the spot. So I can tell you what I tell. Yeah, I can tell you what I tell my students all the time. You're going to have reviews, referees, committee members evaluating your work all your life. If you pursue an academic career, but even outside of academia, right? You're going to have job interviews, in your life. People will review you. and they will give you feedback. They will tell you things, and it's the best approach possible is to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. So whenever, for example, and I'm gonna get to your question. Whenever we write a paper, we get referee reports, and the first instinct is to read the referee reports and be like, oh come on, this referee didn't understand anything of what we have done. That's definitely not true. This is wrong. You don't understand thermodynamics. But then you don't allow the referee the benefit of the doubt. And so a colleague of mine was like, when you get these referee reports, write your rebuttal right away, and the next day throw it away, and write it again. And then throw it away again, and the third day it's going to be good. So always treat your referees, your feedback givers, as if they were the dearest person to you. Like in my case, I even think that, suppose this is my wife, my person that loves me the most. They're trying to give me honest feedback. There must be something that I can learn from every comment. Yeah? So even, if a referee didn't understand my paper because they're, not knowledgeable in the field, well, the question is not why did you read this paper if you don't know anything about it. The question is, how could I have written a better paper in such a way that even a non-expert could have understood it? Having said that, the answer to how do I respond to a question by someone that I don't know the answer to, think about that they're the dearest person to you. And I think the answer will come. And it's totally okay if you say, in this moment, on this spot, I cannot think of an answer to this question, but maybe if we discuss it afterwards, I can have some time to think about it and maybe we can come up with it. Right? That would be the answer that I could give, for example, to my wife if she had a question. I don't know now, and then let me think about it.
Any more questions?
Sir, I want to ask something. What do you think about someone that is really a forgetful person, but he wants to explain something and he gets more to like cheat or something like that. So, do you think it's kind of like effective ways?
Sorry, I think so. Someone who's very forgetful, you said?
Yeah.
And they want to.
They need more to like a cheat note.
Cheat notes.
Or explain something.
You're asking for a friend. You mentioned someone who's well. Yeah. I don't know. I never write notes. I do have, some notes in my slides, and I do have, the presenter mode facing to me, so that I know what's coming up. And sometimes I do have notes. During talks, however, typically I am so pumped and ready to tell my story that the story flows. And so it's not a matter of remembering things. Also, if you don't have many things on the slides, there is fewer things to remember, right? If you fill your slide with a bunch of stuff and a bunch of text, you're going to be distracted, right? But if your slide is just the main message of it and the figure that's supporting it, the story is kind of there. You just need to explain the figure and get to the main message. So that's one thing. I think having a clean slide in a well-constructed story is going to help you. The other thing is rehearse. You have to practice, particularly if you have a hard time in remembering things and transitions. You have to practice, and in particular, you have to practice transitions. So it's really bad when you see a presenter that is like, okay, so now we're gonna plan a presentation. Oh yeah, and the first thing that you need to do is adjust to your audience. Right? So transitions are crucial moments, like beginnings and endings, and so practice those. Be mindful exactly of what is going to come next. You can even do an exercise, like go into any slide and think which one is the next one. Actually, rehearse your presentation, then close it, and then try. Like you just open the first slide and you think, now I need to know exactly what's coming up. Oh yeah, it's that slide, and click it and see if it's correct. I think rehearsing will help you a lot. I don't particularly use cheat notes. I mean, also I don't learn by heart my speech, but I'm also like 500 years old now, so I'm kind of experienced. So at the beginning, I had the temptation, maybe I should rehearse it so much that it sounds perfect. Particularly because English is not anyone's native language, I think, in this room, and so we are at a disadvantage when we're speaking in a language that is not our own. On the other hand, it does look kind of bad if you have cheat sheets and you're reading. Because if you're reading, you're not telling a story, right? It's difficult to believe that you are engaging us and telling us a story you cannot wait to tell. So yeah, I hope that answers a little bit your question.
Any more questions?
Thank you, sir. I want to ask. Sometimes we need to present a long equation. So I just want to know what is your recommendation, how to present it. Like, should we break the equation into parts, or should we just put all of it in one slide?
I like how you say sometimes we have to. Like there is someone that tells us you have to present that equation. No, that's true. So if you're presenting an equation, you have to honor the equation, and you have to explain every single thing in it. So whenever I have an equation, typically what I do, like I add labels to every single part of it, besides the trivial ones. I mean, if it's Boltzmann constant, and we're talking about thermodynamics, everybody knows. But then I add little labels where this is this, this is this. And then I also add a description, like what is this equation telling me, what is the story, right? So this equation is saying that the heat absorbed and the heat dissipated are in balance, and so on. So take your time. You can also animate the equations. Like there's this equation right here, right? This is an equation that can easily be animated. So I can add point by point. I could add the first part, which is this ratio here, times S0 squared. I'm not going to go into detail what it is, I also forgot. Then I can add this k-dependent term. And then I can add this one. I think this is actually a noise term, and this is another noise term. And so I can animate, like the general physical principle is related to the amplitude of the signal, but we have to take into account the chemical nature of the neighbors, at the next part, and the disorder of the system, the next part, and then you build it up. In that case, I think building it up might help.
Maybe final 2 questions if there is any.
Of course there is. There's no audience without questions.
You should stare at them awkwardly.
No, I mean.
Yeah, please.
Sir, I want to ask you about what is your opinion on our preparation? Like, we prepare the presentation so much and cut it down and make it more or less perfect for our presentation, and then we organize it to the point where we can know the presentation itself, the next slide, and etc. For some reason, after that much preparation and we present it, we kind of crash in the middle, like a rope, and tension is so high that it just broke.
Yeah.
Something like that. What is your opinion, sir?
Yeah. So I don't know really, but I can imagine that. Yeah, I think when you say we crash, you're relating to the fact that you're so stressed about it and you care about it so much that you over prepared. You invested so much energy, and there is so much at stake. And many times you can feel really overwhelming. And so my recommendation would be you're ready, right? If you've done everything, you have planned it, you have structured it properly, your slides are clean, your speech is tuned to perfection, then it's really just about stress management, right? And so then I go back to the recommendations that experts have on stress management. Manage your stress properly. So practice, check. You have done it. You have tuning. Take care of yourself. I like playing sport. I detox like that. I do yoga, climbing. I go to the gym like that. Take care of yourself. Have a good night's sleep. And maybe also practice this know your enemy. That might actually change the way you approach the presentation. So maybe you rehearsed it in your room or in a meeting room with a couple of friends. Well, ask people outside of your circle to listen to it. And maybe push yourself in the room where you're going to actually be doing the presentation when it's going to be the real thing. That also will help you to reduce the stress.
If I may add, the second part is really important. The communication. I mean, I give advice to students, like we discuss about their big days, like interview for scholarship and so on. I usually give advice like do your preparations until D-2. Then D-1, spend the time with your family, go to salon, do manicure, pedicure, forget about everything because you did what you did. So it's just about the stress part that usually will make or break. Personally, I always sleep a lot before my BA. So I sleep like 12 hours before my PhD defense. I usually sleep. So to be sure that the day I will be like very fresh. Or, like I said, we did the preparation, everything is perfect, so it's time for the second. Maybe last questions before we close. Walter, okay, one last question. So what is senior in our lecture?
Yeah, I'd like to learn more about this. So I'd like to learn about this because I usually feel very careful when I present important subjects.
Yeah. Oh,
Even though they said that I'm senior, but I'm
Still nervous.
Yeah.
yeah, me too. I mean, that means that you care.
Andrea, how to be confident in front of people? Sometimes the introvert people like, not me, I'm extrovert, so maybe someone here, they don't like people see him, for example, then they are confused how to say or how to introduce themselves, and then how to make the confidence.
Yeah, it's very difficult for me to answer that because I'm also very extrovert. And I love talking, I love having eyes on me, I love...
Right, sometimes students
Yeah,
confident.
I think honestly the best answer that I can give is to do all these things. And maybe, out of these things, the practice and know your enemy and put yourself in the position of discomfort that you're going to be when you actually do the presentation. That is the best advice for people that don't like to stand in front of audience, don't like to be, the center of attention. Honestly, there is no other way, because if I don't like being listened to, then I cannot give a presentation because I am the presentation. Right? There is no other way. You cannot hide behind your slides. Very often we see scientists that are like, giving it back to the audience and just going through the slides like this. But that's not the presentation. That's not what they are here for. They're here to listen to a human being tell a story. And so the best that you can do is practice and put yourself in an awkward position until you develop the skills to become confident over time. Also be kind to yourself. Like, no one is born as a natural presenter. And it's a process. I remember when I was a young PhD student, I hated the idea of giving presentations. I hated it. Giving a presentation at an international conference can be really stressful. I hated it to the point, and I know that there is actually scientists that hate their job. I hated it to the point that I felt like maybe this is not for me. Like if I need to keep on giving presentations to advance in my career, which is true if you work in academia because you want to share your work at conferences, job interviews, and group meetings. If you hate doing it, then it's very stressful. And I certainly had that. So this is not something that will change from one day to the next. Your next presentation will still be almost as bad as the one before. But maybe you will take a step in the right direction. And also, the confidence will increase step by step. So be kind to yourself. Don't think that everything is, or that everyone is perfect in your presentation. If you've ever been to a scientific conference, the bar is very low. It's easy to be great presentation.
Okay, I think that a perfect conclusion.